Hello everyone. Good morning. Good morning, Nikunj. Good morning, Suraj. How are you
Good
guys?
morning, Shivani.
Good
I'm
morning,
good.
everyone.
Great. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you for taking the pain to join us on a Saturday morning. I assure you this session is going to be very great. So we have with us today Suraj Saste from Coditas. He's the product manager at Coditas. And we have Nikunj Sharma, who's the founder of PM School. Yeah, and so I will leave the introduction to the guys themselves. They will tell us more about their journey and a short intro about themselves. So without taking much of your time, I'm handing over the virtual stage to Nikunj and Suraj.
And Nikunj,
Thank you. Thank
you
you.
go first.
Yeah, for sure. So, guys, I've been in product management for the last 7 years out of the 8 years work ex in total. Essentially, in the last 2 years, I started this platform called PM School. That's why we do these webinars to obviously pump up awareness. To give you all context, I've been in your boat. I've sort of struggled trying to figure out how do you get into a product manager role, right? That's your chicken egg situation, especially if you're coming from a profile which is not product management. When you apply for certain roles, you might get stuck into that limbo, right? Hey, how do you get shortlisted? That's your first challenge. Then, how do you build these multiple sort of functional skills to get into your first PM role? That's where PM School came up, along with my co-founders Ankit and Kushal. All three of us have been in product management for the last, say, 8 to 10 years independently. We started this sort of platform to make sure people who are struggling to get into product management, we try to help them, and that's been our mission. And going forward, that's what we're looking for in the next 2 to 3 years. Over to you, Suraj.
Yeah, so I have started off as an entrepreneur. I graduated as an engineer from University of Pune almost 6 years ago, and then I was all set to go to San Francisco to study masters ahead. But while being in college, we had a bunch of ideas we were working on, and I decided to give it a shot. So I went to Mumbai Embassy, declined my US visa, stayed here instead to build a startup. Built the first one, which are into AR VR for real estate. Built that for about 3 years. After doing that for about 3 years, took a small exit from the same, and then started one more. It was into supply chain tech space called Acre Foods. The first startup we raised $100,000 as an investment. It was based in Pune only. For the second one in Acre Foods, we raised seed funding from Mumbai Angels investors, who are one of the most successful angel investing platform in India. And then what happened is we scaled Acre Foods to bring a lot of good customers like Swiggy, Zomato, Fuzzy Cafe, Subway, etc. But later on, after COVID, we had our own share of problems, and we had to sort of end our journey much before than what everybody had thought of. And after doing that, I wanted to move to corporate, so I sort of joined Coditas through a referral, and that's where we are at today here. I am a product manager at Coditas. I work on a healthcare project across one of the biggest projects at Coditas. So that's about me. So I think it's 11:03. I think we should continue with the presentation. I'll just share my screen. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, Suraj.
Yes, go for it.
Okay. Okay, brilliant. So good morning again to everyone. So to sort of begin, what is an idea, right? So Nikunj, what do you think it is an idea? What comes to your mind when you describe an idea to anybody?
Essentially, the source of a problem statement. You think there's a pain point for a certain sort of group of users, and you figure you can solve it.
Yeah, yeah. So that's exactly right, right? So we all think of or and see a lot of problems around us, and sort of brainstorm and then come up with a solution, and that's essential idea, right? Taking a problem and converting into a solution. It's a bunch of crazy, fearless folks trying to solve something without caring about anything else, whether it's a success, fame, or a sort of validation from an external world. So, on the similar lines, what sort of historic examples come to your mind? I wish everyone to sort of just comment what sort of historic examples of idea to product comes to your mind. And now to ask to Nikunj, what example comes to your mind of the topic?
Uber, Airbnb, Slack, obviously the upstarts, right? People who totally thought of an existing problem which was solved and there were alternatives, but sort of just streamrolled and built a massive experience which was 10x of the existing alternatives.
Right, right. Brilliant examples. So one of the examples which comes close to my heart and is really special is this one. I don't know how many people can guess the photo. I'll give another few seconds for everybody to comment what are their guesses on what I'm talking about, which idea to product I'm talking about when you see this photo. So okay, so without wasting much of a time, it is Wright brothers. Whoever guessed it right. So when it came to Wright brothers, they saw a bird flying and they thought, what if we could also fly like that in the sky? And that is the most historic example of idea to product which comes to my mind. And every time they demonstrated the further improvements in the airplane they were trying to build, there were more people who were coming to see the demonstrations. It was in the news, and every time they used to fail, right? And they kept patiently trying so hard to convert and bring that idea to reality. And that's essentially the thought process of bringing the idea to product in any context, whether you're an entrepreneur behind it, whether you're a product manager behind it, or whether you're a developer behind it, right? So it's multiple iterations, multiple failures, then bringing the success in the end. Now, moving on, coming to the new age software examples of idea to product, the top of my mind is Salesforce, obviously. I don't know how many people know this, but Salesforce was started by a guy called Mark Benioff. To tell you an interesting facts about Mark Benioff, he sold his first application, How to Juggle, for a $75 at the age of 15, while still being in school, probably, right? And then he joined USC, and he then, after that, interned at Apple Macintosh team briefly, after which he joined Oracle, where he held multiple roles from sales, marketing, product development. And then he was named as a Rookie of the Year at 23, at the age 23, and later promoted as a VP to become the youngest VP at that time at Oracle, right? So, and after that successful journey at Oracle and Apple, he then came up with an idea of Salesforce, right? He essentially thought at that time when the softwares were being, there were like hard storages within the company, and that's how the software was run through LAN and all the wires and everything. He thought that's going to go away. So he essentially started advocating that software is going to end and SaaS is going to come, which is a software as a service, which is the most prominent form of any software usage we see around us, right? And he actually practically advocated that and founded Salesforce as a part of that journey. And this sort of idea doesn't come just out of the blue, right? It's years of hard work that has been put behind it in order to observe, process things, process pain points around them, and that's how the journey of Salesforce has been. Another idea which comes to my mind is Slack, which was like an opportunity in adversity that way, right? It was started by a guy called Stuart Butterfield, and Stuart and his team was actually creating a game called Glitch. And within that game, while building the game, they had raised a good amount of funding from outside world, but somehow even after publishing it, it was not picking up. And it came to a point where they had only 6 months of capital left, and they had to now figure out which next idea we are going to do, because Glitch is not working out. And they brainstormed internally, and they realized within the Glitch, within the game, that built a messaging framework, a messaging product which you could use to message to your peers, right? And that's where they thought that this could be a product, and then Slack was born. And we know what Slack is today, right? Being a very powerful product across thousands of product companies in the world. And even within the Glitch, there was another product called Flickr, which became a largest platform to share images and video products. And I remember 10 years ago, while being in school or college, the instead of Google Photos, it was a Flickr was the go-to platform for all of us to search for images and videos, right? So those have been, and obviously there are many more examples of software examples in today's world from idea to product. But just wanted to give you a quick glimpse of how those have come to fruition, right? Now, this is one of the theory which I remember hearing back in my college days, and I don't know who came up with it, but it stuck with me very much because it was so powerful. The person said that things always happen twice, right? The first is in brain or your mind, right? In order for it to happen in your brain or your mind, you need to be extremely curious about things happening around you. You need to be very observant and process the things which you're observing, whether it's a problems, pain point, the behaviors which are happening around us as humans, right? And then you do your trial and error, and that can be pretty much like you jotting things down on the paper and figuring out what combinations of the problem or a solution would work, and then what could you do, and that's how you take that journey, right? The second piece which is important obviously is in reality, right? Brain or a mind would still contribute 20-25% for the start of the process, and in reality would be like 70-75% of it, right? That's where a focused execution is required, where you are supposed to focus on the execution pieces. You should not get distracted in terms of whatever new thing comes to your mind, you should execute it. You need to be very focused on what piece you want to solve. You have to be very practical about it, like Stuart Butterfield was, right? When they knew they had only 6 months of capital left, and they had to pivot and sort of figure out which idea they're going to go after to sustain furthermore. And that's where you become practical. Coming to the divide and execute, obviously, if you see, they had two ideas, which was Flickr and Slack. Slack was actually the second idea they pursued. The first was a Flickr, and Flickr ended up becoming big, and then they picked up Slack, right? So they sort of divided their strategy in order to execute things more efficiently, and that's pretty much valid in all the things we do in real life, right? And that is, I'm pretty sure, I would like even Nikunj to share his own thoughts around things happening twice.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. My co-founder and I had been trying to start something, right? Think of weekend projects, and we've been product managers, but we always used to sort of brainstorm a certain ideas. Back in say 2019, we wanted to start a power rental company. Think of being able to rent a power bank because we read an article over the internet and we are like, hey, this is something cool. And with internet and the mobile phone batteries dying and obviously the battery life going down, we might want to start it. We started that. We figured that's not working. We almost tied up with Leading Tech, Chinese sort of power rental sort of technology company. We realized that it's capital incentive did not work out, gave up. Finally, Ankit was like, hey, why not we teach product management? It comes naturally to us. There's no friction for us to even sort of build a curriculum or the right sort of structure. We know we've been doing this for the last 8 years. Among us, we've been giving interviews, nearly 100 odd interviews, right? Why not build like a platform to help product managers? They're like, hey, why not? Let's start. These days, with the advent of no-code platforms and websites and landing pages, we set up landing page, and the rest is history. 1.5 years, we've been sort of working on PM School, and it's been going really well. So idea is there, but you might need that bias to action to execute, as Suraj said, right?
Right, right. That's as real life example as it can get to all of us. Okay, so coming to the actual, points, that how and where do I start after listening to all this jazz around how do you convert an idea to product and all of that. It is equally important how and where do I start. So the first one is the internships. Obviously, I would sincerely request everyone who's within college or who's just graduated to keep doing these internships. I remember I was in the first year of my mechanical engineering, and I studied mechanical engineering. And so there's a preparatory leave that is almost 1.5 months before the exams, and I could wrap up my schedule within like 4 to 6 hours. And I was so bored that what would you do with the additional time you have? You can't even roam because it's a preparatory leave. Your parents are supposed they want you to sit tight and study hard, right? And I was figuring out that after my exams I'm going to get the equal amount of time, and that's going to be a pure vacation, and I'm going to get even further more bored. So what do I do? So I contacted one of my relative who was working in Mahindra. They used to manufacture truck engines over there in the plant in Chakan. I pursued the person to get me an internship. I actually didn't know anything about engineering because I was still in my first year. And he was generous enough to pull some strings and get me a 3-week internship at Mahindra Engines. I interned there with the folks from IIT. The kind of thought process I saw there was phenomenal. I was like a 17, 18-year-old kid on the shop floor who used to ask all sorts of questions in terms of who built the floor, who built the roof, and why is it in a certain way, how does the Kanban work, and I could test all those theories which are taught in college, and that was a wonderful experience. Then later on, I ended up doing one more internship, which was into a digital space where a person from Delhi was trying to market their ideas, and The internship was around increasing the reach on the social media, right? And there was so much massive learning. Even 8 years ago, it was so relevant, and I can see that that experience at that time is still sort of relevant in today's world after 8 years of doing that internship while being in college. So I sincerely recommend internships. If you want to start early, you start within the college, but no harm even if you graduate and start doing internships. There could also be a paid internships pretty much today now, since you can learn skills on internet and you can apply it to some of the companies. Just another small example that how you can pick up small gigs is you can talk to anybody in your network, set up a Shopify for them, set up a social media apps for them, run small social media campaigns for them, and that is going to be a tremendous learning. And that's going to be only few thousand rupees of somebody putting that, but you get like lakhs of rupees of massive learning behind it. So those have been my experiences. I'll now hand over it to Nikunj to share furthermore on the rest of the points on the slide.
For sure, for sure. Thank you, Suraj. I have some interesting questions on comments. Would like to sort of take them before we jump into the meat of the session, right?
Yes.
We have a question that I have not studied engineering from the person's perspective, and how do I do the basic prep to get into track management? Brilliant question. See, essentially, think of today if you're starting from zero, and everybody starts from zero. Don't think of, hey, how do I even figure what's the ABC of product management. Essentially, there are multiple ways to start. Today there is no lack of resources online, right? Before even say joining a program or figuring out the right way to learn, I would suggest get hold of a lot of these online resources. If you just Google product management today, you'll find multiple blogs on Medium. People are writing about it. Think of Sachin Rekhi, who's obviously a leader based out of Silicon Valley. I think he has a massive Medium blog. Andrew Chen, even Indian people, Manas Aloi, a friend of mine who's based out of Bangalore, PM at Gojek, he has a website wherein he has listed resources across different categories of product management. If you go to Udemy or a lot of these online LMS courses, right? You can get a hold of these online courses, which are say 15, 16 hours, and a lot of these courses are free. Coursera has a basic course. Udemy also has a very sort of cheaper version of online product management by Code Mercer. So, bias to action, you can always start understanding and consuming product management from the available content out there. That's step one. Step two is think of from a hiring manager's perspective, right? You have to build certain segments in your profile that says or states that you have done some work in product management. See, if you know 100% of the job, then it's too super easy. You should be starting the journey 20-30% the line. Right? That's why what Suraj said, bragging an internship or certain weekend projects, being able to solve certain case studies. Today, there are multiple platforms out there which run weekly case study competitions, and these are product management case studies. PM School is one. Check out our LinkedIn page. Every week we run a case study competition. There's Dare to Compete, which has been sort of tying up with a lot of B schools, and a lot of the case study competitions are open to the public, right? There's the product folks. Why not check out their product downs, right? Indian communities and product managers have really sort of shown up in the last, say, 1.5 years. Join these Slack communities to get connected to senior product leaders or existing product managers, right? Fact of the matter is you need to start. Three sort of pathways to you get an online course, try to get an internship, and be a part of these communities so that you can get engagement opportunities with a lot of existing product managers. That's your start, right? There's one really interesting question around what's the difference between business analysts and product managers. Suraj, you want to take that?
Yeah, absolutely. So see, guys, it's actually a very small difference between all three. And Bhavik has asked this question. So basically, business analyst is a default title being sort of used at a services companies who are product owners or product managers. Sometimes people also use product owners, but product managers is a typical title used in the product company. So it's like Flipkarts of the world or Creds of the world, right? And the rest of the companies like Tata Technologies, Tata Consultancy, and then the rest of the Infosys and everybody else uses business analyst. Now that is just an industry term. There's not much of a difference between business analyst or product owner. A small difference, which I would say, which I have seen, is at Coditas we are actually a services company where we are building hundreds of thousands of products within the company, for the strong brands, pretty much from HDFC to others, right? Business analyst is a bit of an inwardly position wherein the subject matter expertise is owned by the client, right? So they are the ones who will hand over to you the basic metrics which they want to do on, and the basic priorities they want to do the things at. That's what the business analyst would pick up things from there and sort of expand on top of them. Product owners are slightly more freedom than the business analyst, where they would have certain other ownerships of the product, right? They can also sometimes prioritize things. Subject matter expertise is shared between the client and the product owners. Subject matter experts can come up with a certain cues they want to sort of track or build on, and product managers can go ahead and sort of give their own suggestions or their own analysis on top of it. Product managers is a further extension of product owners, right? So a product manager is going to mostly cover multiple aspects of product, right? So to give an example, all of us have used Paytm app, right? And every small logo or every small icon on the app is essentially a product in itself. So a product manager is going to be responsible for multiple products within the product, and he or she is also going to be owner in terms of how they want to prioritize, right? And even within the product manager, I've seen there are 3 to 4 formats of product manager. I would certainly ask Nikunj to share more, but what I have observed is there's a product manager who would be associated with the feature development and actual execution of the product and the product delivery. A product manager, a second, would be who would have a goal-based management in terms of increasing the reach or the of the product, and those are called product delivery managers. Those are also called product managers. Third would be a technical product manager who would be responsible for understanding the architecture and doing things more efficiently in terms of the technology. So these are sometimes some popular formats of product management, and that sort of difference between the three. I hope, Bhavik, I've answered. I would ask Nikunj to share more on that.
Yeah, so really well put, Suraj. Just to sort of conclude, think of bucketing responsibilities in discovery and delivery, these two buckets, right? As a product manager, you own the discovery side as well. See, essentially, the difference between business analysts and product managers is business analysts would be responsible for, say, delivery, wherein they're working to be a bridge between the business side and technology and making sure that a certain project is being delivered. For a product manager, currently what I am at a gaming company, I own the customer pain and the metrics straight up from the discovery side. The nuance here is I have to come up with solving for the right customer pain point. Say there could be hundreds of possibilities, right? But what should I be solving in the current quarter with respect to, say, my gameplay, or there are like, say, 100 sort of features I could build. So I own the metrics and discovery end to end for a PM. In the services sector, essentially, you're working with companies on large term projects, right? Think of you working with a gaming client for like a 10-month project wherein you want to deliver a certain app with respect to certain specifics. Here, the metrics and discovery part is kind of assisted by the business side, that is the company who is engaging with you. So you do not own discovery as much, but it depends, right? I'm pretty sure Coditas works with a lot of companies wherein the companies come up with a very broad 50,000 problem statement and they would want Coditas to handle the discovery as well. So don't go into these titles. It depends on the company. It depends on the role. You would want to sort of engage with the hiring manager, and during the process, you are at an information asymmetry, right? So as much as the person is trying to know you, you're supposed to know about the role as detailed as possible. In fact, I know a lot of roles that my candidates at PM School today apply to. The title is product management, but the role inside might be a project manager, right? So you would be defined by what responsibilities you would be owning after joining the company. So try to make sure you understand the role as deeply as possible.
So, just to let audience know what Nikunj does for a living is that he's a product manager in one of the most popular apps we see around us. So everybody has seen, I think, Rummy Circle ad. So he's associated with that product, and also 11 Circle, which is for a cricket, which I think Ranveer Singh does the ad for the same, and it's been popped up at YouTube n number of times. So Nikunj is associated with these popular sort of products which we see around us.
Thank you, Suraj, for that. There's one more interesting question we'll take, and then we'll jump to the mate, guys. Sorry if we're not taking all of your questions, but don't worry. At the end of the session, we'll be taking it.
Yes, so keep posting your additional questions and we'll take it again at the end of
Yes.
the session.
So, is it necessary for a PM to have the knowledge of the tech stack of the product? Karan, good question. So, I come from an electronics and instrumentation background, right? I'm not a hardcore techie, and I've never written a single line of code in my life. So, when you start your PM journey, for you to crack into your first PM role, in fact, a lot of the interviews you might not want. It's fine if you're not coming from a hardcore tech background, but there's one sort of clinical note to figure here. You have to be open to learn technology concepts, because as a product manager you would be working with engineers, right? So you cannot say that, hey, I do not love technology, because at the heart of it, you're building products, you're working with engineers, right? It's fine to come from a non-tech background, but you can gradually learn a lot of these concepts on the job. You have to empathize with your engineers, because they are the vanguard and the flag bearers of the ideas that you have, and they will be helping you execute that piece of code to production, right? So for sure, you should be getting good in technology, but does not really mean that if you're coming from non. In fact, my co-founder, there are 38 teachers associated with PM School, and out of them, 21 come from a non-tech background. So a lot of us have learned technology concepts and how do you sort of work with engineers on the job, right?
Yep,
Cool.
I think we can resume. Yeah.
So, guys, I'll answer your questions. Let me sort of complete the deck. The first question that everyone has is, how do I start, right? A cold start problem. This is like a chicken and egg situation. As Suraj pointed out, try to get an internship. That's the least friction way. Companies might not be willing to give you a full-time job, but they don't mind trying testing you out for like a 2-month period, right? Just reach out to people, leverage platforms like LinkedIn, AngelList, Hire, and Top Hire, right? These platforms list a lot of internship opportunities as well. You should also be tracking a lot of pre-Series A and Series A funded companies, because smaller startups require a lot of interns and people part-time for initiatives that they are looking at and they might not be super sure on. So you can cold email, cold message, or say just connect to them on LinkedIn, right? And trust me, when I need something out of LinkedIn, I would like spam 100 people. Uh, Moving on, as I said, right, try to participate and create like a portfolio. If today you have a resume which says that, hey, you've been a developer or you've been a designer. So you have certain traits, but you have to build certain product thinking traits, right? How do you do that? Participate in a lot of these case study competitions run by PMs to dare to compete and other product communities. Create like a portfolio, right? Today, designers have a portfolio on platforms like Behance and Dribble. Why can't aspiring product managers have a portfolio? That's where we have built our own challenges website as well. Try to solve a lot of product cases. I know of certain candidates or students of mine wherein they might not have joined certain cohort-based courses, but they interviewed somewhere, they got rejected, but they remembered the questions that they got asked, and they wrote a blog about it, and then they reach out to the founders again. Hey, I might not have solved the same problem at stead. I might not be prepared back then, but I thought about it, and this is the way I would want to approach it. And they got an internship opportunity back there, right? I know people who, I think there was a candidate who did like a critique of MyGate application and reached out to the co-founder, and the co-founder reached out back to him that, hey, would you want to sort of figure out a role? They might not have opened a PM role straight up, but 6 months down the line, they were able to sort of give him a PM role, right? So you have to start somewhere. Uh, Make sure that you get into the tech ecosystem. Don't worry about getting that PM title straight off the bat. You might join the company in a peripheral role. You could be a developer or you could be an analyst. But once you join a company which at the heart and core of it has a tech product, it's easier for you to transition internally, right? I've seen internal transitions to product management happen all the time. Even in Coditas, I'm pretty sure that Coditas as a company must promote its people sort of to transition after 1 or 2 years. There could be people internally who might have started as like a developer, worked in Coditas for 1.5, 2 years, and realized that, hey, they love how product managers approach certain problem statements, and they love the hypothesis solutioning part of it, and they would have pushed, realized that with their manager one-on-ones, and got through that transition internally. So internal mobility happens all the time. Think of joining the right companies. That's step one. Think of working in the right sort of culture ecosystem. Then you can always figure out the right role for you once you are in the company, right? And finally, obviously, answering, I think a bunch of you had also asked certification courses, right? Since I'm from PM School, the first thing I'll say, obviously, join the PM School program. You land on a website, on a course page, and apply for it. But aside from PM School, there are a lot of opportunities. You can obviously look at platforms like Refoods, something that helped me over the years. I did like a growth series program from them. You can also look at platforms like Udacity and Udemy to just get started in product management. So don't get hell bent on certification as such. For you, it's the factor of how much knowledge you have. The learning is the main. Essentially, you as a PM are more focused on outcomes versus output, right? Don't worry about me knocking off PMP certification or XYZ certifications. I see a lot of people on LinkedIn just adding certifications, right? But end of the day, when you get tested in the interviews, it's about what you know rather than the certification you have. The certifications can get your foot in the door for you to get an interview, but eventually, how do you do well in the interview? That's the meta goal, right? So try to get better there. Suraj, can we move to the next slide?
Yes.
Yeah. So, just wanted to give you certain examples of how what the different narratives we talked about in the previous slide, right? My co-founder himself joined a very early stage startup. See, when you join a startup, the friction to sort of crack a certain role is a lot lesser when you try to get into a bigger setup, right? So keep a lookout on a lot of startups in pre-series A stage. You can obviously track news story platforms like Your Story and Info42 to track early startups which have, say, raised a seed stage fund. And when you join an early stage startup, you have a lot more autonomy and you can try different roles, right? That's how my co-founder got into product management and then moved into the strategy side of things. He joined the startup, get exposure to different kind of roles, and then figured out, hey, product is what he wanted to do. Then went deep into product management. Let's go to the next slide here. Again, my co-founder's friend Jitu, he works at Dream11. He joined the company as a software development engineer, worked there for like 2 years, worked very closely with the PMs there, then pushed for an internal transition and moved into a product role. Right? Trust me, this happens a lot more. People have that goal of getting into product management in the say next 3 months. Think of it as like a milestone. Join the right company, join companies like Coditas, where you get into the company and you would then get exposure to different kind of roles. You would learn design, you would learn technology. You might also get to work on projects across different industries, from insurance to healthcare, as Suraj said. To try to get exposure as much as possible. Once you're in the right company, then you can move into different role and figure out what's the right fit as per your skills and the company's vision, right? So it's more about joining the right company culture. At least that's what I would suggest everyone to go for. Now, in the previous slides, we've talked about, hey, how do you start? How do you apply, right? Challenging that first sort of narrative of how do I get my sort of profile shortlisted. But going 10,000 feet below the ground, right? How do you prepare for interviews? How do you, obviously, other than the online courses that I talked about, how do you even figure, okay, these are the questions that I would get in a PM interview? How do you get better at solving these? The first thing that I did back in 2013 was pick up these books, Swipe to Unlock, Decode and Conquer, Cracking the PM Interview, and my personal favorite is Inspired by Marty Kagan. Trust me, you read these books in the same order because Inspired by Marty Kagan is more detailed and nuanced once you have understood product management at the core. And once you consume these books, you would get a sense of what product management is in the light of a lot of people who have managed products over the years, right? These books have been written by existing product managers who have built global products. So you would get a taste of the problems they face and how do they perceive with respect to their lens of figuring product management day to day, right? Again, stressing on the same fact, right? Bias to action. You have to solve a lot more case studies. When you apply to a company, don't just share your resume. If you have a certain case study competition that you have participated in, you can build like a portfolio of case study solutions. And with that portfolio and resume, you have like a stronger pitch to get into, at least get an interview shot, right? Next slide, Suraj. Again, join a course, right? The PM School course is out there, and we've been running it for the last 1.5 years. Mail us at hello@pmschool.io if you have any questions around our program. Lastly, the last point is super close to me, dear to my heart. Back in 2013, I did not have a lot of opportunities. Today, product management has become mainstream, but we did not have a lot of courses out there, right? The only way I could learn is reach out to people who are already product managers and figure out where I'm going wrong. I remember giving like 4 interviews after my first PM stint. I was not able to get my next product manager stint. I wanted to move to a bigger setup, get exposed to growth and scale. And I reached out to random strangers on LinkedIn to understand what product management is, and I requested them to take my mock interview. See, essentially, today you have to be the champion vanguard of your own success, right? Try to find a mentor. If you have alums or seniors in your college, right, who are product managers, try to think of second degree, third degree connections who are product managers, reach out to them, right? See, if you reach out to 10 people, at least 2 or 3 people will respond to you. Trust me, people are nice and people will help you, right? Get as many relationships as possible. If you are connected to some people who are product managers, it's a hell lot easier for you to get that guidance and mentor, right? Essentially, think of being in a college when you are in final year and trying to prepare for placements and having that senior to guide you. Now, we've talked about obviously getting a PM role, where do you start, what are the different knowledge bases, but fundamentally to define what product management is, what are the different skills that really matter? You If you just Google product management skills, you'll find different ways people approach product management, and there could be say 10 different other keywords aside from this. But at a very 50,000 feet level, I would say that these are the four main buckets, right? uh, Taking each point at its set, what is problem solving? Problem solving is essentially you have a certain pain point for a certain TG, and how do you sort of use technology, leverage technology, and build a feature or build a product out of it. Now, when I say that, that's super easy to say, but doing that, the execution is super difficult because there are 4 steps in it. One is figuring out the right problem to solve. Second is how do you solve it, right? For example, I can give you a say problem statement. Let's say there's an e-commerce company, and on the e-commerce company product page, so people are dropping off and not adding that product to cart. So there could be multiple ways to solve that problem. You could add more and more reviews to build trust. Because if you assume trust is the main problem, maybe the UX is not easy for people to figure out how do you add that product to cart. So problem solving is super difficult. That's why a lot of product manager interviews as well, people will start by giving you a hypothesis problem statement like, hey, you're a product manager at Netflix, a certain metric has gone down, how would you solve it? The other person is not really looking at what would be the final solution, but your approach to the solution is so really important, right? How do you break down the 50,000 feet settlement? Do you ask clarifying questions? Do you really figure out what the problem is? So a lot of first APM roles or the first product manager roles that you will crack in the interviews, you will get very broad global statements, and you are supposed to prod the interviewer, engage them, and figure out what essentially the problem is. The second bucket is analytical. See, as product managers, you can obviously rely on qualitative side of your thinking, but there's certain quantitative aspect that really matter. When you prioritize your roadmap, when you think of what needs to be built, do you have certain North Star metrics, right? These thinking is also tested in the interview, wherein the person will ask, hey, how do you prioritize different sort of features, right? This is essentially a question to figure the criteria. Do you have a data-driven mindset or not? Even in your introduction, right? When you talk about what you have done, don't think of, hey, I built, I managed or led. Whatever work you have done in your past, even if it's non-product management work, you have no product management experience, try to assign a quantifiable value to every work that you have done. See, you might have worked with the operations team to reduce the process time by half an hour. Say that I was able to sort of reduce the tag by half an hour. Any work that you did in the past, do you have that mindset to assign a single KPI to it? That's what really matters. The third side is behavioral. I would not talk about it. Any profile interview you go out there, behavioral questions are asked, right? This is more around your work ethics, your attitude, and your culture with the company values. This is standard across not just product management but all different profiles. Strategy questions. Strategy questions are again a question of more about your breadth of knowledge. Are you in sync with a sector? For example, today, if I apply to Swiggy, which is a food tech company, do I really understand the space? Obviously, me being an outsider, how much knowledge have I consumed? A lot of strategy questions are asked in product manager interviews to get a pulse on how good you know their domain, right? Have you done your basic research? And again, this is more around your structure and thought process rather than the final sort of strategic output. For example, I've been asked this question that, hey, now should Swiggy be entering into the medical pharmacy, online pharmacy space, right? Now, it's not about whether the answer is yes or no. How do you list out the pros and cons of it? What are the pros of doing this and what are the cons of doing it? It's more about a mutual discussion with the interviewer, not about whether ye karna hai ki nahi karna. You get what I'm trying to say, right? Yep, that's it. Let's up the gas and go deep into each of these skills, right? Now, for you to figure how do we do this, we would do like a small role play here. I would ask the question to Suraj and let's see how he does try to solve it. And we'll try to pick certain nitpicks whether Suraj is about to crack it, right? Let's say we pick the first question, right? This is a typical problem solving question that you get in product interviews. Suraj, let's say I'm the interviewer just for 2 minutes. Sorry for doing this on a live session, but yeah,
No problem.
uh, how would you improve YouTube, Suraj?
So YouTube has a lot of products, right? So they have a video streaming, they have YouTube music and stuff like that. So I'm going to take an assumption that we are talking about only YouTube video streaming as a product right now. My question, I have actually a reverse question to you, Nikunj. Who are we trying to improve the product for? Are we trying to improve it for creators, viewers, or advertisers?
Let's pick the creators side. I'm assuming obviously there could be different ways, but let's narrow down our discussion and focus on creators.
Okay. So creators, there are two aspects of it, right? So when a creator puts a video and then later they can monetize it after a certain benchmark, and there's an engagement factor as well. So which factor are we trying to track? Is it engagement or is it revenue for creators?
Let's say you would want, say, the meta goal of YouTube is more and more content creation, but quality content creation. How do
Right.
we enable creators to create quality content as much as possible, right? Obviously, the consumer side comes after, but your end goal is more and more content creation. You can obviously define a metric for it. And how do you ease that friction of uploading the video and helping creators to create quality videos as well?
So I think there are two aspects of it, right? So one is about how much quality content you put out, as you rightly said, and then how much engagement follows that, right? So there can be small milestones which can be designed, whether how to get to the first 100 subscribers. YouTube has now recently started pushing the shorts as well, which is like a Instagram Reels or TikTok sort of small videos, right? And that's where we would sort of structure it and think that what sort of solutions would work in order to further improve the engagements and then sort of increase the engagement on the platform for creators. And then obviously we can do the whole session for next half an hour brainstorming about multiple things and the pros and cons around the same.
Got it, got it. Brilliant, guys. Guys, I would not take more time going into the question. Ideally, a question takes like 15 to 20 minutes, and an interview, generally, you would get prodded with three different questions. But to highlight how Suraj tried to attempt it, see, he did not jump to the solution. That's key. In product interviews, it's not about answering the solution as fast as possible. It's more about how do you approach the question, right? A, he spent time in the problem space defining what needs to be done. When you talk about how would you improve YouTube, that's a very 50,000 feet statement, right? So he tried to define it by asking questions to me. B, then he tried to figure the right stakeholder. That is kiske liye kar rahe, right? YouTube again has three different stakeholders at a very global stage. Your creators, consumers, and advertisers. Obviously, there can be an overlap, but then we define creators. Third, then he tried to stress on, okay, what aspect of creators we would want to sort of improve, right? Us trying to assign a metric to it. So it's more about how you engage the interviewer and break that 50,000 feet question into a 10,000 feet level, right? So this structure and the approach is super critical to product interviews. And as you become better at it, it becomes easier for you to crack a product management interview. Yep. With respect to tips, you have to be goal and metric focused. You have to think of who your TG is, and you have to define what metric you are optimizing for. And essentially, with respect to the final solution, see, you can always ask for 30 seconds, process your thoughts, and then suggest the right solution, right? Don't worry about answering fast. It's about answering with the right thought process. Don't talk while you're thinking. Don't go into a ramble, right? Ask the interviewer, hey, give me 30 seconds, let me process my thoughts, write down 3 4 bullet points, and then process, answer the question. Right?
Everyone who has watched Rocket Sing and remembers that when Ranveer is asked a question, sell me a pen, he sort of takes his time to process it and comes up with an answer, right? So that's always the key, right? Never sort of jump to an answer. Always think, take your time, 2, 3, 5 minutes. Perfectly fine. That's perfectly valid. But yes, be creative and be thoughtful in terms of what you're answering.
For sure, yeah. Lock and loaded. Good point. Analytical questions. Guys, we are already at 11:45. We had planned to take one more question, but I guess there are a bunch of interesting questions that you guys have asked. Just one sort of note for you. There are two buckets of analytic questions. Either it could be a guesstimate bucket, that is essentially a question like, hey, how many Google searches happen, or how many iPhones are sold in China. This is essentially asked for you to figure how do you estimate a certain problem size. As PMs also, there are multiple features you could be building, right? So you're essentially estimating the ROI of certain features. Do you have that knack of mathematical thinking? Generally, within the company, you might have an analyst helping you, but in the interview, are you tactical in solving these questions? That's what is tested, right? So think of how many Google searches are performed per second. It's not about you coming with a final number in like a split second or taking a minute. It's about sharing your thought process with the interview. You first start with again asking a clarifying question. Hey, when we're talking about Google searches, are we thinking of web, mobile? What sort of channel? Say the interview says only think of web. Then what time are we looking at? What is the time period we're looking at? Right? You have locked it out. Say we're thinking of number of searches on a certain day. Say it's a weekday and morning. Once that is done, now you think of the ceiling of what could be the maximum searches performed. You first think of what are the active user count on Google. That's essentially the ceiling. Then you bucket that into different TGs, right? Different kind of TGs might have a different frequency of searching and using and consuming Google, right? So with different, it's essentially an equation in your mind. A guesstimate question is solved with an equation, A plus B plus C plus D. And what are those different TGs? And each TGs will have a different frequency. A school going or a college going student might be in college, they might not be, say, using Google. That's an assumption. Then people who are at a workplace, they might be using Google extensively. How many times do they search? Take an assumption. Discuss with the interviewer. Wherever you are stuck, try to get the interviewer's input, right? The second bucket of analytical questions are more around metrics. How do you define success for features? How do you define success for, say, an MVP or product you have launched? For here, I would suggest consuming a lot of blogs around product metrics. There is Amplitude, Mixpanel. You can obviously watch videos of Google Analytics. It's more a factor of exposure and your knowledge of how metrics work in a product ecosystem. Again, the product metrics and success could change from product to product and what really matters for that company. But I would suggest reading a lot more blogs on product metrics to get better here. Let's move on. Yeah. Behavioral questions, as I said, you should have a pitch ready for a lot of these behavioral questions. You should know about, hey, what was your sort of success for one of the projects? I've been asked this question, hey, talk to me about a project which was really good for you and you learned from it, or talk to me about a project which was a failure. So these are standard behavioral questions. Try to think of your career narrative or work experience. It could be a college project also. Need not be, if you are just a fresher, don't worry about, hey, I don't have work experience. In college fest, you might have worked with a certain college community, right? So whatever work you have done, try to think of problems you solved, how did you solve them, and what does success mean for you, right? So think of building these pitch narrative, 30-second, 40-second pitch, and being ready with behavioral questions. And trust me, you'll get better more with practice. This is an easy field. I would not focus more here. Let's move to the next slide. Next one now. Yeah. Strategy questions. So strategy questions are more about your research into the domain for the company that you're applying in. The first step that I do if I'm applying at company X would be, first I'll go through their website end to end. I'll try to understand their products and solutions. I'll also read their about page, which states their mission and vision, right? Think of Netflix. If today Netflix is entering into games, you might see Netflix is an OTT platform, but just go read their mission statement, right? They say that they are a company who stands for entertainment and they want to entertain users, and there could be multiple use cases they might be solving for in the next 5 year or 10 year horizon. So having an understanding of the company's mission statement, having an understanding of the products and solutions help. That's step one. That's basic sanity. Another sort of next sort of pivotal step is, can you do certain competitor or market research? Think of other companies in the same space and how are they approaching the market, right? Trying to understand from their website. There are a lot of news articles that you can get your hands on. In fact, I'll do a tertiary research, the third step would be if I can get a sense of who my panelist is, the person who's interviewing me, and just stalk them on LinkedIn, a lot of these platforms, if they have certain videos and they have talked about their strategy, their company strategy in the next years. I keep writing. If someone is into getting interviewed by me, I'm pretty sure they will look at a lot of webinars that I participate in. Right? Cool. That's it. Uh, I guess this is like the last slide. Suraj, I'll let you take it because this is super specific and we kind of partially covered it. Over to you, Suraj.
Correct, correct. So this is basically talks about the different versions of product managers as we talked about, right? So there's a delivery side and there's a discovery side, and we can say the third piece would be a tech side of things. So if you come from a non-tech background, which both Nikunj and me we come from a non-tech background, and we would say that it it was we've got into product management, right? Coming from a non-tech background, never written a single line of code. For there, it's like mostly consumer tech companies like Swiggy, you can say Zomato, or other YouTube and stuff like that. But when it's a tech-oriented product, which is going to be used by the developers, like for example Postman or Browser Stack, which is tech-heavy, then obviously it is required for you to have a CS or a similar background of comp science or programming, and that sort of helps you get there as a product manager or a technical product manager. So those are sort of the differences over there. But obviously, large products being the consumer tech products, which we see around us and which we use on a day-to-day life, it is always possible for a non-tech product to get into the product management. So I think the slides are over here. I would now uh, go to the questions. We have a lot of questions, so we can take it one by one.
Super interesting question. I was just looking at the questions.
Yeah.
Really cool.
There's
So,
one I can take. What would be a
yeah,
life of a product manager
yes,
be at
yes.
Coditas? So, interestingly, to tell you all the kind of clientele we do at Coditas in terms of the product development is very, very interesting. I've seen rest of my teammates, rest of my friends who work at similar companies like TCS or Infosys. The product management role over there is still very, very inwardly in terms of client owning a lot of the pieces and you building on top of the business analyst or a product manager or a product owner. At Coditas, we've developed such a clientele which gives us a liberty to go ahead and sort of further discover things, right? So, to give an example, in the healthcare product, which I am a product manager at, we actually have access to the analytics, consumer analytics who use the product, and these are the users based around US, and we are actually seeing where are they dropping, what sort of interactions are they doing with the product, and we sort of can come up with own suggestions, own theories and analysis, and those have been very, very proactively accepted from our clients end. So it's a role which I would say sits anywhere between a product manager or a product owner, as we don't 100% own the subject matter expertise of our clients, but there's a lot more freedom and flexibility than just being a product owner of it. So that's the product manager life at Coditas. Another interesting point at Coditas is we being the tech and the product brain behind almost, what is it, 30-40 products we are building at Coditas. There's always room for you to shift, right? You spend 1.5 years to 2 years on a single product in a single domain, and you feel that you've spent a lot of time there and you want to shift to a new domain. That's always possible because we actually have a lot of products within the company, and then you can get in touch with the relevant folks, and if you qualify there, you can definitely make a move. So that's the biggest upside we have at Coditas, building multiple products. Yeah,
Nice one.
second.
Thank you for that, Suraj. Cool. The next one is Coditas hiring for product managers? Suraj, you would know more.
Yes, yes, we are. We are always hiring. We are growing very aggressively. So there is link which has been posted. So it's careers.coditas.com. I'll repeat it. It's careers.coditas.com. That's where you go and figure out all the open positions in terms of product management. If you have any confusion, if you need any help, please feel free to get me connected on LinkedIn. And then I'd be happy to walk you through the multiple positions which are open, and then I sort of also help you get into the same.
Got it. Uh, let's jump to what tools are essential for a business analyst and workflow making tools, analysis tools. Which tools do you generally use? I like to take that. Uh,
Yes.
I it depends on the company, right? But there are three buckets of tools. One is the tool that gets you access to data, that is behavioral analytics insights of what user traffic is and what user events are being performed, or basically just looking at the metrics for your tools, right? So that tool categories your analytics, your mix panels, or Clever Tap, or say GA of the world, right? You might in certain companies you might not have these tools, and you might have Tableau, or you might have access to SQL. That's why a PM skill that is important is SQL querying. And trust me, you learn it the hard way over the weekend. You can obviously pick up courses on Code Academy and SQL Zoo to get up to speed to query. And trust me, it was difficult for me early on. I joined a startup a couple of years back, and I realized I had to learn querying. Initially, there was like a friction and mental block. Hey, how do I go about doing this? But it takes like a week, and you figure it out, right? Then yeah.
So, Nikunj,
For a
I have an
P,
additional
yeah,
question attached to it.
yeah.
A lot of the times people feel this that, while being a product manager or even starting the journey as an associate product manager, you need to know a lot of the tools, right? So, can you address that? Like, did you know a lot of the tools when you got into product management? Because
No,
I
no, no.
think it's not necessary, right? So, if you could
Yeah,
throw slight light on that.
yeah. I get questions from people who apply for the PM School program as well. Hey, would you cover design tools? Would I get to learn Balsamic, Figma? And I tell them, hey, for sure, our assignment is on Figma, and we would cover how Figma is used like 10-15 minutes. But that's not the crux, right? Learning a design wireframing tool, or learning how Asana or Jira works, how project management works, or learning analytics, that's the easy part. You just need that hands-on approach. You'll spend 2-3 hours, and like over a weekend, you will learn it. The difficult part is what to, from a wireframing tool perspective, how do you define what are the primary elements, what are the secondary elements? Basically, who is my user, right? Kya banana hai, that's the difficult part. For a metric analytics tool, it's not about, okay, how do you use a GA? The difficult part is when you're working with your engineer analytics and you tell them, hey, what events should be tracked and how are you tracking the events? Are you looking at the unique value? Are you looking at ratios? Are you looking at magnitude values? Trust me, I've gone wrong. I was looking at a metric and I was looking at average values. I used to be happy. And with certain traffic, we realized that we should not be looking at average values, and we shifted looking at median values. That's why I see essentially average value sometimes can be skewed depending on the metric, which like a magnitude metric, right? So it's about definition of the metric. And when you are sitting with your engineers, you also tell them with a certain event what all parameters you want to track. You want to say, for example, a play of a YouTube button, you might want to track the number of minutes they stream and what geography they are from, what channel they are coming from, right? So it's the event or metric construct that is difficult. Defining the right metric, there could be 100 things you might want to track, but then choosing, say, the 5 things that really matter, massaging and interpreting the data is more difficult rather than understanding how these tools work. Again, from a design perspective, learning wireframing on Figma or Balsamic is easier. The difficult part is how or what your information architecture looks like. Exactly kya banana hai, that's the main decision making part. Cool. Let's move to the next question. So for PM, since tech skills are not much of a requirement skill, is it possible to participate in weekend case studies? Yeah, yeah, you can always see the weekend case studies by PM School, and a lot of platforms out there are open to public. Anybody and everybody can sign up on our portals and participate in it. Feel free. See, essentially, and even if you don't know certain, if you're participating in a competition where you are 100% there, then there's no point. You need to be 30-40% there. That's how you get tested, right? If I'm interviewing at a company and I like totally cracked it and it was totally like smooth sailing, you would want to challenge yourself, right? That's where you learn. Uh,
So this one is
Diksha
interesting.
has,
Uh,
yeah,
uh, I think Nikunj, I would
go for
ask
it.
you to take this.
Yeah,
Diksha is
yeah.
a banking professional with 6 years of experience, and she's willing to do PMP certification. Does this help in her resume? Also, will she get a future opportunity to enter in IT?
So one signal is sorted. You've done a PMP certification. That means that you understand how project management works. You have exposure to agile fundamentals, which is critical because
No,
majority of
she's saying
your
she's
project
willing
management.
to do. She's saying she's willing to do PMP certification.
Oh, so it helps, but it's not the only thing. right? You get see it helps. It basically signals that if once you do it, you have exposure to agile fundamentals and product management. And but product management is a multifunctional role where you need to be good in design, business side, analytical, and the problem solving part, right? So you'll need to build skills across different verticals.
See, one thing I want to stress to connect to the answer Nikunj gave is, guys, all the tools which are used in product management are super easy because those are primarily consumer tools, right? So whether it's Miro or Jira or Asana, you take Trello, these tools are used by millions of people out there. So they're built in such a way that they're very easy to grasp, easy to use. What you need to focus on is your ability to think creatively and all the aspects we covered in the presentation, right? Trust me when I say this, if you develop that piece right, you will be able to pick up all the tools pretty much in within a week. I'm telling you, Trello is so easy that I see my college juniors using it very frequently, even track their assignments or stuff like that, right? Or the internship pipeline they're tracking themselves. So don't worry about the tools. They are very easy. You focus on the problem solving aspect and developing the right mindset being a product guy. So
All right.
okay, so Haritha has asked next one. Okay, before that, the Ganesh has one question. I
Yes.
think Nikunj, I'll throw it to you. As a product
Yes.
manager, what is the biggest challenge you face while working on a SaaS product, right? So Nikunj, you've worked on a multiple SaaS products in your career. Even I'm curious to sort of hear your thoughts on the same.
So I'll answer this very broadly. There are a lot of nuances, but the fundamental problem that I struggled with was when you're selling a SaaS product, there are multiple stakeholders. The decision maker who purchases the SaaS product is different from the users of the SaaS product. For example, I'm today evaluating should we use Balsamic or Figma, and I'm like say head of design, or I could be a product lead right at a company. So I might not myself use these tools. My designers, my UX and UI folks would be using it. Be it any other tool, right? So the decision maker could be convinced by certain aspects that matter for the designers and certain other aspects that might not matter for the other stakeholders. So the nuance there is the decision maker might not be a user for the tool, but you need to show them the ROI, right, in certain ways. Or hey, how can the tool increase productivity for you? How can the tool sort of change the way how your processes work and streamline your product ops in general? That's really crucial. The second thing I would stress on the pricing in SaaS is a lot more complicated than you as a consumer consume and see it to be. Think of pricing on Postman or a lot of these tools out there, right? Browser stack. So there are multiple facets of pricing. For a consumer tech product, the pricing is super simple. Generally, you pay upfront and there's like an average ticket price, there's average card, you buy something. For SaaS, there are multiple levers of pricing. Right? There could be pricing based on storage. There could be pricing based on number of users. There could be think of the innovation that happens in SaaS pricing. The first thing that I see is those three verticals of packages that you see in a lot of these SaaS pricing pages, right? Here, your basic plan, then sort of advanced plan, and for the third one, enterprise contact us. These kind of sort of
Another
pricing pages.
another very popular example to connect to your answer is that how AWS in the initial days was giving things for free. So because the strategy around the pricing was that increasing the adoption, right? So or forget AWS, look at Geo, right? Geo is essentially the biggest SaaS product we use on a daily basis, right? For first 6 months or 1 year, the strategy was surrounding adopting more users and bringing more users on the platform, and that's where a free strategy was adopted. And later the pricing was changed, and now even when they're facing fierce competition between each other, they're raising the pricing because they know that the pricing which was initially put is not sustainable, right? So that's how it is going to be the goal based thing also, right, Nikunj?
Yeah, for sure. Well said. Yeah. Harita has a question. As an experienced BA to transition to PM role, I'm considering the opportunity to work with startups, thinking it will offer a lot more learning experience. Is that a good way to transition? There's no right and wrong, right? You can always start your career from big company and then jump into startups. Or personally, I started in a startup back then. I'll be super honest. When I joined my first job after graduation, my criteria was to get a job in Mumbai because that's where my family is. My criteria was not even about, hey, am I working in a startup? I was like, I got a big company, but that was in Pune. I realized that I did not want to go to Pune. That's where I figured, hey, Mumbai is where my home and friends are. Let me get this startup role in Mumbai. So a startup for sure gives you a lot more autonomy, exposure to different skills. It helps, but there's no right and wrong. Like everybody has a different approach, and there's no right school of thought. Whatever works for you. It's all about exposure, and there are different paths to reach the same end.
So what is the career path to be a PM as a fresher? Shiv has asked this. So, Shiv, to cover that aspect, both of us. So, I started as an entrepreneur pretty much as a fresher. Nikunj started as a fresher, going to the product aspect of things, right? So, the I think we have covered a lot of things of how to prepare and stuff like that. As he rightly said, that you need to do cold emailing, cold messaging on LinkedIn. Let me tell you guys, it works. It has worked even in the case of finding investors for my startups. So it definitely works. You need to be patient about it and you need to be a little thoughtful in terms of who are you reaching out, right? You cannot reach to somebody too big. Like you can't message TCS CEO and say, Suraj, this is not working here. I'm pestering this guy for over a year and he's not answering. You can't reach to that big of a fish also very early. You need to figure out who's the next person to you who's going to be more accessible and you can reach out, right? Whether it's your alum, as Nikunj said, or people within your contact and network. And that's where you ask to start with internships for the product management or the associate product management role, right? And that is like, I think, the first milestone for to start as a fresher.
Well said, yeah, Suraj. So, last question of the day. Atharva has asked, is it important to do an MBA for someone to be a PM? It's not the most critical thing. I myself am not an MBA. My co-founder is not an MBA at PM School, and we've been in product management for the last 8 odd years. A lot of my friends who are product managers not an MBA, but does not mean that you see. Don't think of MBA as a right platform for a certain role. MBA does help with certain sort of skill building and your knowledge base expanding and your network sort of exploring toward new webs and opportunities. Think of MBA as that master's sort of course that opens new opportunity doors for you, right? If I would, in fact, when I speak to students and they tell me if I want to, they're super sure to get into product management, then I would advise them to join a program like PM School. If they're not really sure they want to do product management, and they might go into consulting, they might go in, they're not, and today with their existing profile, they're not say able to crack a lot of roles. I would say, hey, why not do an MBA? Your network will expand. You'll when you join a certain B school, and it's certainly in the top tier, a lot of companies come for placements as well. So you would want to do that research where whatever B school you decide, what kind of opportunities would you be getting? That's your sort of main sort of input to decide that whether you want to go for MBA.
I think we've covered almost all the questions. I'm just trying to scroll through and see if we have not missed any.
Yeah.
Okay,
I think
we've covered almost
Nishita answered.
all. We've covered all the questions. Brilliant.
Th- Thank you guys. Have a good
Okay.
Saturday. Lovely
Thank you
weekend.
so much, guys. You can
Bye.
resume binge watching Money Heist now. I'll throw it over to Shivani to give the closing comments.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nikunj and Suraj. It was a very informative session. I'm sure it was very helpful for everyone who joined us. And yes, as Suraj said, continue binge watching your favorite show. And yeah, until next time, thank you so much. Please share your feedback for this session. I've posted the link in the comments. So please help us know how was the session for you. Thank you, everyone. See you again. Bye bye. Take care.
Bye,
Thank you.
guys.
Bye
Have a
bye.
great weekend.
Okay, have a great weekend. Bye bye.